What if the person your whole family calls a hero has been lying to them for more than 70 years? I am 93 years old, and before my time runs out, there is something I have to say out loud for the first time. People see medals on my wall, photographs of me shaking hands with important men, smiling newspapers folded in frames. They think they know my story. They don't. The truth is darker, smaller, quieter, and it has lived inside me like a locked room I never dared to open. Tonight, I am turning the key. It didn't begin with villains or flags or loud speeches. It began with a simple choice that didn't feel like a choice at all. A moment when fear and pride stood side by side, and I picked the wrong one. For decades, I let everyone believe I fought for the right side. They tell my grandchildren about my bravery. They name their children after me. But the reality is that I worked in shadows for people who wore the wrong colors, spoke the wrong slogans, and demanded loyalty wrapped in beautiful words like duty, honor, and country. Those words are powerful when you're young and hungry to matter. Even now, my hands tremble thinking about how easily a life can split in two. On the surface, I was the man everyone admired, disciplined, polite, unshakable in public. Beneath that mask, I was carrying messages, passing names, listening behind doors that were never meant for me. Every smile at a family dinner hid another lie. Every birthday candle my children blew out-flickered over a father who was not the man they believed he was. You learn to act, to wear your own face like a disguise, and eventually you forget where the disguise ends. Why am I saying this now? Because silence becomes heavier than truth. Because there are nights when I wake up hearing voices from a time most people only read about in books. And I see the consequences of my choices in faces that never had the chance to grow old. I was called a hero because the winners of history needed. I was not one. I was something far more ordinary and far more dangerous. A frightened young man who convinced himself that wrong was right and then kept going until the lie became his life. I don't know how my family will see me after this is spoken. Maybe they will refuse to believe it. Maybe they will look at me the way I have secretly looked at myself all these years. But before the clock stops, they deserve to know who I really was, not the statue they built around my silence. And you deserve to hear how an admired man can become the wrong kind of spy without ever meaning to. Step by step, choice by choice, truth by truth, left unspoken. If you are still here with me, listening to this confession, I need you to stay present for a moment. Stories like this are not entertainment to me. They are the only way I know to make sense of what I did and what it cost. Tell me in the comments, what part of this story struck you the most so far and why it matters to you. Your perspective helps others realize they are not alone in questioning the past and the stories they were told. Understanding the full weight of this story requires patience and attention because secrets like mine were built over decades, layer by layer, and they do not unravel in a single sentence. If this topic feels important, if you believe these revelations deserve to be heard, leave a like. It tells the platform that this kind of truth is worth showing to more people, and if you want to follow every part of this confession as it unfolds, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The hardest parts are still ahead. Recruitment was not drums and banners. It arrived quietly, like fog on a harbor, and by the time you notice fog, you are already inside it. After the first confession you heard, "This is the road that led me there." I was 19, thin with hunger for purpose, and the world after the war still hummed with fear. Men in good coats asked careful questions, praised my memory and my languages, and most of all, my ability to keep silent. They did not say the word spy. They said service, stability, order, words that sound gentle when your country feels like it could crack. The first test looked harmless. Carry a sealed envelope on a train. Say nothing. Notice everything. I passed. A stipend appeared. My mother's rent was paid. It is astonishing how right and wrong begin to blur when money fills empty plates and strangers call you valuable. Meetings followed in cafes with clattering cups, radios whispering in corners, and lectures about greater good. I told myself I was a patriot. I told myself everyone bends the truth to stay safe. Here is the twist I did not see. The hands guiding me did not belong to the people my neighbors trusted. Their maps drew borders differently, their questions aimed not at enemies, but at friends. By the time I understood, I had already crossed an invisible line inside myself. Pride kept me from turning back. They called it balance of power. I called it opportunity. History would later give them louder names, but I knew them only as calm voices that never accepted no. At home, I was the helpful son, the attentive brother, later the dependable fiancé. In shadow, I practiced being two people at once. Each small agreement made the next one easier. Promises gathered like snow until movement itself carried me forward. I kept saying I would stop after the next errand, the next message, the next quiet yes. I did not stop. Momentum is a patient master. If you have listened this far, write in the comments one word that captures what you feel about recruitment stories like this. Your words matter more than you think. Would you like me to develop the next topic? Another turn arrived when a familiar face appeared among those listening to me, a former classmate who smiled as if nothing had changed. That moment made it clear how ordinary betrayal can look. It does not wear horns. It wears your own reflection. It stayed with me, and for years, like ash. There is a special kind of loneliness that comes from being loved for a person who does not exist. By my late 20s, my surface life looked immaculate. I had a respectable job, a ring on my finger, and neighbors who waved with easy admiration. I carried groceries, fixed radios, told harmless jokes at dinner. People trusted me with house keys and secrets about leaky roofs and stubborn children. They thought they knew me. They knew my shadow, not my shape. Underneath, the second life tightened around me like a well-tailored suit. I learned how to disappear in plain sight. You don't sneak through alleys with trench coats and passwords. You attend birthday parties, you pour tea, you listen. Information does not shout. It hides inside casual sentences, in who glances at whom, in which light stays on after midnight across the street. I became fluent in this quiet language. My greatest weapon was not a gun, but the ability to look harmless. Every morning began with choices layered on choices. Which version of myself would walk into the kitchen? The gentle father tying shoelaces, or the watcher cataloguing names in a small notebook written in a hand only I could decipher? Both were me, and neither was. A life like this teaches you to partition your heart. You laugh sincerely while another part of you is calculating train timetables, border checkpoints, and who spoke too freely at last week's meeting. Nothing is ever just a conversation again. The danger rarely announced itself with sirens. It lived in the ordinary, a knock that lasted a half-second too long, a letter that smelled faintly of another city, a stranger lingering at a market stall. My wife would ask if something was on my mind, and I would smile, say I was tired, tell a small, polished lie. Lies become muscle memory. They are as easy as breathing when you practice for years. Here is where the fracture deepened. My children believed their father was a man of honor. Their drawings showed me with capes, medals, bright sun behind my head. Teachers invited me to speak about service. The irony was a constant drumbeat. The more the public version of me grew heroic, the further the private truth fell out of reach. To confess would shatter their childhood. To stay silent meant living inside a mask. I chose silence again and again, yet cracks formed. There were nights when I woke drenched in memory, convinced a car had stopped outside for me. There were dinners where a simple question, "How was your day?" felt like a spotlight. I grew skilled at redirecting, at turning conversations into safe waters. But guilt has its own gravity. It pulls on your words, bends them, leaves a subtle tremor others mistake for age or worry. The twist came slowly. I began believing my own performance. The family man felt more real than the agent I had become, and that illusion was as dangerous as any assignment. Because when you forget which self is true, you can justify anything. You tell yourself you are protecting the people you love. You tell yourself history is complicated, that sides are labels written by survivors. It's remarkable what the human mind will accept when the alternative is losing everything you love. There is always a line you think you will never cross. You tell yourself you are different, that you are only passing messages, only moving pieces others designed. Then one day the line moves, and you realize your footprints are already on the other side. My turning point did not look dramatic. No explosions, no chase. It came in the form of a brown folder placed gently on a table between 2 cups of coffee that had already gone cold. Inside were names, ordinary names, a teacher, a railway clerk, a young journalist who asked too many questions in the wrong rooms, people I had seen at markets, people who nodded to me on trams. My task was simple: confirm addresses, routines, who they spoke to. Just verify, they said. Nothing more. But verification is never nothing. It is a fuse, and once it is lit, you don't control the direction of the fire. I followed instructions the way habit teaches you. I walked familiar streets with unfamiliar eyes. I noted which windows glowed at dusk, which doors were locked from the outside, who carried worry in their shoulders. I turned in the folder. No dramatic music, just a polite thank you, and the soft click of a drawer closing. Days later, the city exhaled strangely. Apartments were emptied, overnight. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Someone's laundry hung on a line for weeks with no one to claim it. That was when I understood exactly what my verification had done. Guilt does not arrive as thunder. It seeps. A child's toy left in a stairwell, a neighbor's dog whining at a door that would not open again. Headlines that did not print details, only phrases like relocation and questioning. I knew better. I had helped draw the map that took people away from their lives. No one said it aloud, but my reflection began to feel like an accusation. I had become what I once swore I would never be, not a bystander, but a link in a chain that hurt people who would never know my name. For years, I had convinced myself that information was neutral, that I was only a messenger, that responsibility belonged to higher offices and sealed rooms I would never see. That mission shattered that lie. Information is never neutral when it is tied to power. Every note I wrote had weight, and that weight fell on human beings with birthdays and kitchens and photographs on mantles. Understanding that changes you in ways you cannot easily repair. The worst part was the praise. Around the same time, my hero story grew brighter. I was thanked publicly for contributions no one could quite define. Medals appeared, ceremonies, applause that felt like it was echoing inside an empty church. My family beamed with pride, unaware that the same hands accepting awards had signed documents that opened doors to rooms no one should ever have entered. Standing on stages while remembering the brown folder was a punishment all its own. That mission is the reason I am speaking now. It is the hinge on which my life turned, the moment when the mask became too heavy to pretend it was my real face. After it, nothing I did felt harmless anymore. Every assignment carried ghosts beside it. I began to see them everywhere, in train windows, in quiet hallways, in the pauses between sentences. You cannot unknow the consequences once you have seen them. History has a strange appetite. It swallows the complicated parts and leaves only the pieces that look good in speeches and textbooks. After the mission that broke something inside me, the outside world did the opposite. It celebrated me. Invitations arrived on heavy paper. Hands I had never shaken gripped mine with admiration. They used words like courage, sacrifice, patriotism. I stood there, smiling for photographs, while the truth pressed against my ribs like a second heartbeat. The story people told about me was beautifully simple. I was the man who had helped protect the nation, who had served with distinction. Nobody asked for details, and I never volunteered them. Simplicity is comforting, nuance is dangerous. My silence became the mortar that held the myth together. Reporters wrote articles. Schools invited me to talk to children about integrity. Trees were planted in my name. Every honor was. Another brick in a monument I knew was built on sand. At home, my family glowed with pride. My children spoke about me the way people speak about statues in public squares, solid, unshakable, pure. My grandchildren listened with wide eyes when someone called me a hero at a dinner table. They drew pictures of me, with flags and bright stars. Their love made the lie harder, not easier. You cannot simply tear down the story when you realize you are standing inside it and everyone you love has made it their shelter. The state, the institutions, the world around me had no interest in the complicated version. They needed symbols, not confessions. They needed clean narratives to soothe the past. So my medals stayed polished, my name appeared in programs, and I learned the choreography of pretending. Thank the audience, nod solemnly, shake hands. Meanwhile, the real record, the one etched in my memory, stayed locked behind my eyes. Here is the twist that stung the most. The more they praised me, the more useful my past work became to the story they wanted to tell. My silence wasn't just self-preservation, it became part of the machinery that rewrote events. The wrong side I had served blurred into something softer in the retelling. People prefer tidy heroes to uncomfortable truths. I watched as history shifted, like a painting being gently repainted while everyone insisted nothing had changed. Living as a celebrated man while knowing the foundation of that celebration was rotten does something to your sense of self. You begin to feel like an exhibit curated by strangers. Every clap sounded like a question. Who do they think they're applauding? I looked down from stages and wondered how many other heroes were quietly carrying stories they could never say out loud. The world loves clear lines. Life rarely offers them. And yet, I said nothing. Not because I was proud, but because I was afraid. Of courts, of disgrace, of the collapse of my family's faith in me, of the way truth can scorch everything in its path. Cowardice wears many masks. Mine wore the face of a gentle old man who smiled in photographs and thanked people for honors he knew he had not earned. Time does not punish you all at once. It erodes you grain by grain. At first, the secret felt like a locked drawer I could choose not to open. Then it became a room in my house. Then it became the house itself. Decades passed, and I learned how memory returns without asking permission. It arrives in the middle of breakfast, in the pause before sleep, in a child's laughter that sounds like someone you once knew and can no longer name. My family saw an aging hero. I saw a man living on borrowed stories. Sleep became a negotiation. I learned to recognize the hour when the walls thinned and the past walked in. A pair of shoes left neatly at a door in my mind. A train platform that never quite empties. I told doctors it was age. It was not. It was the bill coming due for every silence I had. Maintained. Guilt doesn't raise its voice, it simply refuses to leave. You carry on with birthdays, weddings, quiet holidays, but there is always an uninvited guest at the table. Paranoia does not appear dramatically either. It grows out of caution that once kept you safe and now keeps you separate. I sat in restaurants with my back to the wall long after there was no reason to. I noticed exits before menus. I scanned crowds without realizing it. My children thought it was habit from service. They weren't entirely wrong. The mind you train for secrecy does not easily retire. It keeps watch even when there is nothing left to guard. Another cost came disguised as respect. People confided in me, asked for advice, told me I was the most trustworthy person they knew. Every compliment landed with a small sting. The more they trusted me, the more acutely I felt the distance between the man they loved and the man I had been. You start to wonder which version of you they would choose if they had the whole story. You start to fear the answer. There were moments of sudden clarity, sharp as broken glass. A museum exhibit about a period I had lived through would list events in clean paragraphs, and I would feel an urge to correct the labels to say, it was messier than this. People disappeared between sentences. Once, a grandchild asked me what bravery really meant. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. The word had too many shadows attached to it. The greatest price, though, was time. Not the time measured on clocks, but the time I spent half present, 1 foot in the room and 1 foot in the past, rehearsing conversations I would never dare to have. Years blurred. Faces grew older around me. History wrote its official version while I carried the unofficial one inside my ribs. The question followed me into old age. Does truth heal, or does it only break differently? At 93, clocks stop being background noise. Each tick feels like a question. Do I let the myth live, or do I finally speak? The room I sit in is filled with smiling photographs and polished medals, the evidence of a life everyone believes they understand. On the top shelf, there is also a small wooden box. Inside it are names, dates, fragments of truth I never destroyed. I used to think I kept them as insurance. Now I know I kept them because part of me wanted the truth to outlive my fear. The decision is not abstract. I see faces when I think about it. My children, who still introduce me as a hero. My grandchildren, who believe courage looks like a uniform and a steady voice. The absent ones from my past, whose stories were erased to make space for the one told about me. Truth is not just light, it burns. Silence is not just darkness, it spreads. Which wound is kinder? Which lie does less damage? I rehearse explanations at night, sentences that begin with, "I wasn't who you think I was," and break apart before they reach the door. Then, an unexpected twist. Someone else has been watching the edges of my story. A letter arrived months ago from a researcher who had found inconsistencies, friendly in tone, precise in its questions. Another person knows there is a seam in the legend. History, it seems, has begun tugging at the thread. I feel relief and terror at the same time. If I speak, the house of cards falls because of me. If I don't, it may fall anyway, without my voice, without context, without the one thing I can still offer, the full account of what happened. And why? I hold two futures in my hands. In one, the family keeps its hero, and I carry the truth alone into the dark. In the other, the truth is spoken, and the room tilts, and everything we thought was solid has to be rearranged. I don't know which is braver. I only know that the past is louder now than it has ever been, and pretending not to hear it feels like another betrayal layered on top of the first. My pen waits on the table. The box is open. The story is leaning toward daylight, but the last step is the hardest one a human being takes. If you are hearing these last words, it means you stayed with me through every shadow, every doubt, every uncomfortable truth. That already tells me something important about you. You are someone who doesn't look away when stories become complicated. Before you go, I want to ask you for one simple thing. If this confession made you think, if it stirred anything in you, write in the comments the phrase, "I stayed until the end, so I know you were here with me." Tell me too what you believe matters more in the end, truth or legacy. If this story helped you see how easily history can wear a mask, leave a like. It may seem small, but it helps more people find this confession, more people question the neat versions of the past they were given. And if you want to hear more voices like mine, final testimonies, uncomfortable secrets, stories that were almost buried, subscribe to the channel. It is the only way these hidden histories keep reaching those willing to listen. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening. And if another video appears on your screen right now, it is not an accident. It is another story that waited a lifetime to be told.